Switzerland. 1967. The Alps rise in the distance, white and permanent above the green valley. The village of Tolochenaz sits quietly in the canton of Vaud, a place of gardens and silence and morning light that arrives without urgency. There are no cameras here, no publicists, no studio executives, no costume fittings at 5 in the morning, no one asking for one more take, one more smile, one more version of Audrey Hepburn for the world to consume. A woman stands at a window looking at the mountains. She is 38 years old. She is, by every measure the entertainment industry uses, at the absolute peak of her career. Beautiful, bankable, beloved, and in possession of a public image so precisely constructed that it has become one of the defining visual icons of the 20th century. She has just walked away from all of it, not because she failed, not because Hollywood rejected her, because she chose this. The mountains, the silence, the ordinary morning, over everything the world was still offering her. The world does not understand this choice. It will spend years trying to. Audrey already knows what she found when she made it. This is episode 4, the choice, the years the cameras couldn't follow, and the phone call that gave everything its meaning. The magazines run the same headline in different fonts throughout 1968 and into 1969. Where is Audrey? Paramount wants to know, directors want to know, the editors of Vogue and Harper's Bazaar want to know. Scripts arrive at her Swiss address from the most respected filmmakers in the world, accompanied by offers that would have seemed impossible a decade earlier. She reads some of them. She declines all of them. The phone rings with a persistence that eventually settles into a kind of resigned occasional checking. Surely, this time, she will say yes. She does not say yes. She is in Tolochenaz. She is gardening. The house is called La Paisible, the peaceful one. It sits on a quiet road in a village small enough that the arrival of strangers is noticed, which means the arrival of photographers is noticed, which means photographers mostly stop coming. The garden is large and unruly in the way that real gardens are, not the manicured architectural gardens of estates and film sets. Audrey tends it with an attention she once reserved for script preparation. She learns the names of plants. She learns what each one needs and when. She learns that patience applied consistently produces results, that urgency never can. Her son Sean is 7. He attends the local school. Audrey drives him there herself in an ordinary car. She picks him up herself. She cooks his dinner. She helps him with his homework at the kitchen table in the evening light. She shops at the local market on Saturday mornings, and the shopkeepers know her name and do not treat her as remarkable. She has not been remarkable here. She has been a neighbor. This is, she understands for the first time in 20 years, what she actually wanted. The marriage to Andrea Dotti had begun with genuine hope. He was Italian, warm, charming, in the effortless way that Italian men of a certain education and background can be charming. Attentive and witty, and apparently incapable of making an ordinary moment feel ordinary. He was a psychiatrist, which had seemed to Audrey both interesting and perhaps useful, given the particular complicated architecture of her own inner life. He was 9 years younger than her, which delighted him and worried her in equal measure. They married in January 1969 in a small ceremony in Morges, near Tolochenaz. Audrey wore a pink Givenchy dress, not white, not the elaborate construction of a first wedding, but something quieter, something that knew what it was. The first years are genuinely happy. Andrea is present, affectionate, engaged with Sean and then with Luca, who arrives in February 1970 after a pregnancy that terrifies Audrey from beginning to end. She is 41. The doctors are careful with their language, but clear in their implication. Her body, marked by the wartime years, by the malnutrition of the hunger winter, by the losses of previous pregnancies, is undertaking something that requires vigilance. She spends the months in a state of controlled, private terror, doing everything the doctors ask, resting more than she wants to, waiting with the particular patience of someone who has learned that wanting something very much does not protect it. Luca arrives safely. Audrey holds him and cries for an hour without stopping. The years that follow Sean in school, Luca growing from infant to toddler to small, demanding person with opinions about everything, are the years Audrey will later identify as the closest she came to the life she had imagined when she imagined a life. She is a mother in the complete sense. She attends every school event. She cooks every meal when she is home and feels genuine guilt when she cannot be. She learns the names of her son's friends and remembers what each of them likes. She is present with an intensity that has only one possible explanation. She is making up for everything that was taken from her own childhood, and she is doing it by ensuring that nothing is taken from theirs. But marriages have their own trajectories, and this one is moving toward a destination Audrey already suspects by the mid-1970s. Andrea Dotti, it emerges, has a reputation in Rome that predates their marriage and does not disappear after it. He is photographed with other women. The photographs appear in Italian gossip magazines, then in European tabloids, then, with the particular cruelty of the era, in American publications that Audrey's friends see before she does. The humiliation is public and repeated. She stays. She tells herself she stays for Luca, for Sean, for the stability that a two-parent household provides even when that household is quietly miserable. She stays the way women of her generation, shaped by a particular understanding of duty and endurance, stay by deciding not to look directly at the thing that cannot be fixed. The few films she makes during this period are exceptions that prove the rule. Robin and Marion in 1976, paired with Sean Connery, directed by Richard Lester. She accepts it because the script moves something in her, because the role is a woman of middle age confronting what remains of love and idealism after time has done its work. It is, in retrospect, the most personally honest performance of her career. A woman examining, with clear eyes and no sentimentality, what is worth holding on to and what must be released. She returns to Tolochenaz after filming and does not make another film for over a decade. By 1982, the marriage to Andrea Dotti has become something neither of them can continue pretending is a marriage. The infidelities have not stopped. The humiliation has accumulated past the point that duty can contain it. Audrey files for divorce at 53 years old, ending her second marriage, and moves through the paperwork and the legal proceedings with the quiet efficiency of someone who has already done her grieving in private. She is alone again. The boys are growing. Sean now in his 20s, Luca approaching his teens. The house is quieter. The garden still requires tending. Then Robert Wolders arrives. He is Dutch, which matters to Audrey in ways she cannot entirely explain but feels immediately. Something in the shared geography of their origins, the flat, northern light, the particular reserve of Dutch character, the way both of them carry the war in their formation without making it the first thing they mention, creates an ease between them that her previous relationships never had. He had been married to the actress Merle Oberon, who died in 1979. He is quiet. He is kind. He has no interest in competing with her fame or redirecting it or managing it for his own advantage. He simply loves her. Without complication or condition, for the first time in her adult life, Audrey experiences this and recognizes it for what it is. She will not marry him. She has had enough of marriage. But Robert Wolders becomes her companion, her anchor, the person who is simply there, in the mornings, in the evenings, at the kitchen table, in the garden, in the difficult private moments that no camera ever captures. He travels with her when she asks him to. He stays home when she needs quiet. He learns without being taught exactly what she needs and provides it without requiring acknowledgement. But in the mid-1980s, something else is building. Luca leaves for university. Sean is long established in his own life. The garden is tended. The mountains are where they have always been. And Audrey, at 58 years old, is beginning to understand that peace, while genuinely preferable to the alternative, is not the same as purpose. The phone call comes in 1988. The UNICEF representative is professional and careful, aware that the woman on the other end of the line has declined every significant professional approach for 20 years and might decline this one as well. The pitch is straightforward. UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund, is seeking a Goodwill Ambassador. Someone whose public recognition is global, whose credibility is beyond question, whose presence in a crisis zone will generate the kind of media coverage that translates into the donations that translate into food and medicine and survival. Audrey listens. Her first response is hesitation of a specific kind, not reluctance, but genuine uncertainty about her qualifications. She is not a diplomat. She has no expertise in development economics or humanitarian law or the logistics of emergency food distribution. She is, she says, just an actress, retired at that. The UNICEF representative's response changes everything. She is not just an actress, she is a survivor. She is a woman who, at the age of 15, in the winter of 1944 into 1945, had eaten tulip bulbs ground into flour because there was nothing else, who had watched her neighbors die of starvation in the occupied Netherlands while German forces requisitioned every food source the country possessed, who had stood in lines at UNRRA, the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration, feeding stations after the liberation, holding out her hands for the bread and powdered milk and chocolate that strangers had organized and transported from the other side of the world to keep her alive. She had been those children, the ones in Ethiopia, in Sudan, in Bangladesh, in every famine zone and refugee camp and war-torn corner of the world where children were dying of the entirely preventable condition of not having enough to eat. The memory arrives with a physical force. Arnhem, 1945. Liberation. British soldiers coming through the streets, and with them the food, the chocolate, the tins, the supplies that represented the difference between another week of survival and the edge that many of her neighbors had already crossed. She had been 15 and skeletal, and had watched the British soldiers move through the town with the particular emotion of someone who understands at the cellular level what it means to be saved by strangers who owed you nothing. She had made herself a promise in that moment, not articulated, not formal. The private vows of a 15-year-old girl are rarely articulated, but present, real. Somewhere in the architecture of everything she subsequently became, there had always been this. If she survived, if she ever had the capacity, she would pay it forward. She would give back what had been given to her. 43 years had passed since Arnhem. She had made films and won awards and worn dresses and become an image that the world reproduced on everything from museum posters to coffee mugs. She had raised 2 sons and survived 2 marriages and found at last a form of private peace in a Swiss valley with a man who loved her simply. None of it had been the payment of the debt. This was. She tells the UNICEF representative yes before the call is finished. No extended deliberation, no consultation with advisors, no negotiation about terms and conditions and the management of her image. Yes, when do we start? Ethiopia, 1988. The briefings had been thorough. UNICEF had prepared her with the statistics, the context, the political dimensions of the famine, the civil war that had created the conditions, the international aid architecture that was trying and failing to keep pace with the scale of the crisis, the number of children currently in acute malnutrition, the mortality projections if the situation did not change. Audrey had listened to all of it and absorbed it with the same discipline she had once applied to learning lines. Nothing in the briefings had prepared her for the camps. She arrives in Ethiopia at 59 years old, dressed simply, no elegance, no Givenchy, nothing that would create the wrong distance between herself and the people she has come to be present with. The camps stretch across the landscape in a way that the mind initially refuses to process as real. The scale, the number of people, the particular quality of suffering that is not dramatic in the cinematic sense, but is instead quiet and relentless and everywhere. The children are the hardest. She picks them up, she cradles them. She sits in the dust of the feeding centers and holds children whose names she cannot ask because she does not speak the language, whose eyes communicate something that requires no translation. She has held children before. Her sons, her friends' children, the children of colleagues on film sets. None of that experience has prepared her for this particular act of holding because these children are balanced at an edge that her sons never were and that she herself, in the worst of the hunger winter, came closer to than she has ever fully acknowledged. She cries. She does not try to stop herself. There is no performance management happening here, no calculation of how she appears in the photographs that the accompanying journalists and photographers are taking with a constancy she is aware of but not focused on. She simply responds to what is in front of her with the full weight of her emotional capacity, which is considerable and which has spent most of her adult life being carefully managed and selectively deployed. Here, it is unmanaged. Here, it is entirely deployed. The photographs go around the world within days. Audrey Hepburn, the woman from the Tiffany's window, the woman in the little black dress, the most elegantly composed public image of a generation, sitting in the red dust of an Ethiopian refugee camp with a starving child pressed against her chest, tears running unchecked down her face, her expression carrying something that cannot be manufactured or directed or art-directed into existence. It is simply grief and compassion and recognition. The donations arrive in volumes that surprise even UNICEF's most experienced fundraisers. Her presence, that particular face, known to every person over 40 in the developed world, now appearing in contexts that shatter every prior association, generates a quality of media attention that translates directly into the financial resources that translate directly into food, medicine, and survival. She understands this mechanism immediately and without sentiment. Her fame, which she has spent 20 years trying to live quietly without, is a tool. Here, applied to this purpose, it saves lives. The calculation is not complicated. She goes back. Sudan in 1989, El Salvador after the earthquake, the same year, walking through rubble in a village where the children have been orphaned by a single morning's violence. Guatemala, where indigenous communities live in a poverty so structural and so long established that it has achieved a kind of terrible invisibility, and where Audrey's presence causes it to be seen. Vietnam, in 1990, a country still defined for most of the Western world by the war that ended 15 years earlier, where she sits with children maimed by landmines with the particular quietness of someone who knows that the right response is presence, not rhetoric. Bangladesh in 1990. Floods, displacement, disease, moving through refugee populations with the opportunistic efficiency of disease in crowded conditions without adequate sanitation. Audrey works 16-hour days. She collapses in the evenings in whatever accommodation UNICEF has arranged, and Robert Wolders, who has come with her, who will come with her everywhere, is there when she collapses. He does not try to talk her out of continuing. He simply makes sure she eats and sleeps enough to continue. Somalia in 1991, the worst yet. The briefings for Somalia are the most serious she has received. Active civil war. No functioning government. UNICEF staff moving through Mogadishu with the awareness that the conflict around them is not historical or contained but present and ongoing. The recommendation gently offered is that the ambassador might consider a more limited engagement for this particular mission. Audrey does not consider it. She goes. The feeding centers in Somalia operate in conditions that represent the absolute limit of what organized humanitarian effort can achieve in the context of total social collapse. Children arrive who are too weak to cry, a detail that will stay with her for the rest of her life, which is not long now. Though she does not know this yet. She sits with them. She holds the ones who can be held. She sits with the mothers. She listens in the particular way that does not require language, the quality of attention that communicates without words that this person sees you, that your suffering is witnessed, that you are not invisible. Her approach across all of these missions is consistent and unremarkable and devastating in its simplicity. She does not give speeches in the field. She does not position herself for photographs or manage the optics of her presence. She arrives, she sits down, she is with people. The cameras follow because she is Audrey Hepburn, and cameras follow Audrey Hepburn, and she uses this fact as purely and efficiently as any tool can be used. 60-plus countries over 5 years. Each visit generating coverage. Each round of coverage generating donations. Each round of donations generating the material resources, the food, the vaccines, the clean water infrastructure that keep specific children alive who would otherwise not survive. Robert Wolders watches her come home from each mission and go through the same process. She collapses. She cries for days, not performed grief, but the private release of someone who has seen things that the human emotional system requires time to process. She sleeps. She gardens. She sits quietly with him in the Swiss evenings and says very little. And then she looks at the calendar and finds the next mission and begins preparing. He never once suggests she stop. By 1991, Audrey Hepburn has done something that no award, no box office record, no fashion retrospective could accomplish. She has become, in the clearest and most literal sense, the person her entire life had been building toward. The connection she draws privately, and occasionally in the rare speeches she gives publicly, is not metaphorical, for it is biographical and specific. In 1945, she was 15 years old and starving in occupied Netherlands, and strangers organized by the United Nations brought food, and she did not die. In 1988, she began organizing strangers to bring food to children in occupied and devastated and famine-stricken corners of the world, and because she was Audrey Hepburn, enough strangers responded to make a measurable difference. The debt repaid. The circle closed. Hollywood had given her many things. The films she had made were real achievements. Roman Holiday and Sabrina and The Nun's Story and Breakfast at Tiffany's and Wait Until Dark represented a body of work that would be studied and celebrated for generations. The Oscar. The 4 other nominations, the Fashion Legacy, the Givenchy collaboration, the little black dress that changed what women wore. These were not trivial. She does not dismiss them, but they were not this. The Presidential Medal of Freedom arrives in 1992, the Jean Hersholt Humanitarian Award from the Academy, the institution that had given her 1 Oscar and nominated her for 4 others, and then in the My Fair Lady year, looked past her entirely. She holds these awards and feels something different from what she felt holding the Oscar in 1954. That had been joy and disbelief, and the particular vertigo of a young woman discovering that the world was going to let her do what she loved. This is something quieter. Something that does not require an audience, something that exists independently of whether anyone is watching. Her sons are watching. Sean and Luca, grown now, track their mother's missions with the particular pride of children who have lived long enough to understand what their parent actually is. They had grown up with the famous mother, the image, the history, the way strangers responded to her presence in public spaces. They had not always found it easy. The weight of being the sons of an icon is its own specific burden. But watching her in the UNICEF years, they understand something about her that the early years had not made fully legible. She had always been this. The war child from Arnhem had always been reaching toward the moment when she could pay back what she was given. The films, the fashion, the fame, all of it had been in service, whether she knew it consciously or not, of building the platform from which she could finally do what she was actually here to do. Robert Wolders watches her settle into this understanding with something that is the closest thing to peace he has ever seen in her. Not happiness exactly. The missions are too brutal for happiness. The things she witnesses too difficult for any response that resembles contentment. But meaning. A person who has found the thing their life is actually for and is living inside that thing radiates something that cannot be counterfeited. She is, in these years, genuinely herself. Not the elegant icon, not the controlled public image, not the Givenchy-dressed star managing her distance from the world. Just a woman in her early 60s, sitting in the dust of refugee camps and the rubble of earthquake sites and the chaotic feeding centers of famine zones, holding children who are the age she was when strangers held her. The garden at La Paisiblo continues to grow. She tends it when she is home. The Alps continue to rise in the distance, white and permanent. The mornings in Tolochenaz continue to arrive without urgency, but something else is arriving. In 1992, Audrey begins to notice a pain. Abdominal, persistent. She is 63 years old and she has been traveling through some of the most challenging physical environments on Earth for 4 years, and she has, for most of her adult life, maintained a relationship with her body's signals that involves a degree of deliberate inattention. There is always more to do. There are always more children. The pain is probably nothing. She ignores it. The pain does not ignore her. It gets worse through the autumn of 1992. She continues working. She is planning the next mission, reviewing the briefing materials, making notes in the margins with the same focused attention she has brought to everything she has committed herself to. There are children who need her. There are donations that her presence will generate. There are feeding stations that her visibility will fund. The pain gets worse. Robert Wolders, who has been watching and saying nothing, finally says something. She agrees to be examined. The results come back in November 1992. Appendicular cancer, rare, advanced. The doctors are careful with their language, but clear in their implication. This is not something that more missions can be scheduled around. This requires immediate, intensive treatment. The timeline, absent treatment, is short. Audrey hears this, and her first response is not about herself. Her first response is about the next mission. Episode 5, the final mission, the last journey, the children she saved, and the final gift she gave the world before she left it. This is Legends of America.